Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to your weekly New Normal webinar. Delighted to have you back with us again today. And for those of you coming the first time, welcome. For those of you returning, great to see you back. We've got a really intriguing topic today, and we're also going to play with a little bit of technology. So it could go massively wrong, or it could be really exciting. Well, it'd be really exciting either way. So without further ado, I'd like to just welcome you in. If you have any questions, as always during the session, please use the chat box and ask your questions, and we'll build it into the conversation as always. And we also have a special section at the end just for questions and answers. So without any further ado, I shall now go on to the agenda, and we'll hand over to my co-conspirator, Shahid Latif. I got it in first.
You did, Steve. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the New Normal webinar series. Myself, Steve Ingram. We started this back in March of 2020. And this is, I'm proud to say, our 41st, I think, webinar broadcast. So thank you for many of you who've joined us along the way on this journey. Through a range of diverse topics, subjects, and wonderful guest experts. We started this as our kind of contribution to what we realized was a significant moment in everybody's lives, both socially, business, and everything else. Everything was going to change, and we knew it enough to know that there was a gap there in people's knowledge and understanding, especially ours first and foremost. And Steve and I thought it'd be great to do some learning ourselves, and along the way share that learning with a wider group and create a community kind of feel for a lot of the knowledge that we've acquired along the way. So we've been going through artificial intelligence, search algorithms on the net, on the shape of retail, on psychology and how it impacts business. And today is an extension of that, another fascinating subject with a great guest expert. And we're going to be talking today about business chemistry. It's a truism almost, but anthropologists will tell you that one of the main defining factors for people's happiness, contentment, whatever, is relationships. How those relationships develop, how you interact with each other. And today we're going to be examining an element of that in terms of how we get on with each other, whether it's work or outside of work. We've got our collaborator who is going to introduce herself shortly. I won't steal Steve or Jess's thunder on that, but welcome, Jess. There will be a Q&A opportunity for our audience as we go through the presentation. Jess has got some wonderful slides to walk us through about business chemistry and understanding a little bit more about how each of us tick, and how in a group of us there's lots of diversity, and how we might understand, interpret, and perhaps use that to best effect in our group dynamics. There is a chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and if you want to make any comments or ask any queries or questions, we'd be happy to table them to the panel as we go through this, time allowing. And at the end, there is a formal Q&A at the end of the presentation, and at which point we'll go through the resource page. Now, the resource page is our commitment, Steve and I, to providing a body of knowledge which is transferable outside of the video broadcast that you see. Yes, we've created a repository, and all of you will be invited to the library of materials which you can access, not just for today's broadcast, but all of the previous 40 as well. So that library is being maintained and it's available for you. But at the same time, we produce a document with further links, white papers, thought leadership, videos, etc. on today's subject. At which point, after we've gone through the resource page, we'll go through and give you a taster for next week's webinar subject. A tantalizing introduction hopefully will encourage you to try and join us next week and hopefully share the good message. If you've enjoyed the webinar series, please do share it amongst your network and let other people know as well. With that, if I may, the person who's at the head of the charge sheet in front of the judge is Steve Ingram again.
So back to me, usual context setting. So I always do one brief intro to talk about the subject we're on about today. So we're talking about business chemistry. And if we think about some common conversation snippets that you might overhear in various offices, in various places, it may be something like, oh, she's great at the big ideas, but don't ask her about the detail. Or they're brilliant on a one-to-one, but you never hear them from meetings. They're very quiet, never contribute, always seem to be thinking, but I don't know if they're worth having in. Or he's a really nice chap and good chap, builds the team nicely, but just can't do confrontation, doesn't manage their difficult conversations. And then the other one, really loves hearing the sound of their own voice and trying to take control and wants to be the cleverest in the room and what have you. And a lot of these are it's all about relationships, and it's all about how people are and how people behave. And I'm personally fascinated about the personalities and the types of people we work with, as we learn to as social styles at Accenture when I was there. And I've learned all sorts of interesting things. And, as a people, we're fascinated about personality. The standard Myers-Briggs that we see, I've got a picture of just on there, is, there's 3.5 million tests done, and we've all got our various blocks on that. So, we're fascinated about that, and it's used a lot within business. And then there's a book, the book Surrounded by Idiots, which is all about the colors of people, and it describes them. It's sold over 2.5 million copies worldwide. So we're all fascinated about it. So anyway, I landed at Deloitte and with the acquisition. And one of the things that I discovered was this wonderful tool that we had called business chemistry. Did a load of digging and then met Jessica and thought, this would be really good to do a webinar on. So we're going to go through, it's going to be, Jess is going to chat about it. We've got a few slides to go with it, not a load of slides. Sounds a bit consultancy. We've got a few slides to talk through, and we're going to do a few surveys online. So have your phones ready so you can contribute when the QR code comes up, and then we can find out a bit. And hopefully, as well as getting a whole load of insight, we'll learn a little bit about ourselves as well as we progress. So while we are doing a changeover of somebody else, Natalie, taking control of the slides, I will hand over to Jess and just say, Jess, welcome to the webinar. And your job is head of business chemistry, but actually you've got a title of chief chemist. So can you give the audience a bit of an idea as to what that is and just your background and what your role entails?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Shahid. Lovely to be online today with you. Yeah, Chief Chemist is, I think, probably the coolest title, particularly working for a set of accountants and consultants. What that means is I lead and run the client practice of business chemistry. And business chemistry is a proprietary, we built it ourselves, tool. 10 years ago, we built it, that we use internally across the globe. It doesn't mean it's any better or worse than the other tools that you've mentioned. I'm a big fan of MBTI and social styles I've worked with as well. But there's a definite purpose behind business chemistry that we couldn't find in the marketplace, which was the interactivity. So what I'm going to teach the audience to do today is not only identify their own styles, but actually importantly, how you interact with others. And so I work with clients. This was an internal, I carved it out, if you like, to clients. So my clients are board members, senior leadership team members, divisional teams. I have worked across the SAP space and IT and business integration systems a little bit too. So I'm hoping some of those on the call I'll be able to relate to. But it's particularly useful for team members to learn how to best interact, build a relationship with stakeholders, particularly those with an opposite style, because we could be insular and think, all right, that's good about me, but how can I teach you actually how to think and act and flex differently with others, because you'll be more successful.
No, that's definitely, yeah. No, I think that's, when we see what the reason for success is in a lot of projects, we see that it's all about how the team succeeds, and the ones where we get I can win but you can't, it never brings the whole success to it together.
No.
So what is different about business chemistry to some of these other ones?
So the other tools that you've mentioned there, and let's take Myers-Briggs or MBTI, which might be the best known. In fact, DISC, if you work across Europe, is very well known there. They're called psychometric tools, Steve, so they're introspective in the first nature. They measure individual attitudes and personality traits rather than these interactive traits I'll teach you today. And overall, business chemistry shares a team behavioural profile. Obviously, I won't be able to do that today, but if I was working with a team, I would show the team profile as well as the individuals. In fact, if I ask the audience members to think about any of those tests they've taken, I wonder if they can still recall all the letters or the numbers or the colours they came out with. Business chemistry, my client's report has this kind of stickability, this ease, this simplicity around it. And when I go back into boards or senior leadership teams, they're still using it to describe what is basically observable behaviour. So the best thing to think about in this way is it's a business-oriented tool, behavioural tool. It looks at preferences of individuals, but others too, but it focuses on interaction because it's based on observable behaviour. And that is why I can teach you it today and without having to take an assessment, for example.
Right. So you're going to teach us to, what's the term I think we use? Self-punch.
Kind of self-punch, yeah. So audience participation. So none of this eating at your desks and lunches. We're certainly going to get people having a go of it in a minute.
I think it's going to be really interesting. Yeah, definitely. So no, I think that's really great. So let's get started.
Yeah, okay. So there's four types. There's four business chemistry types. And first and foremost, you are one of all four types, okay? So you're not going to be put in a box of what I'm about to explain, and you mustn't be. And I'm going to get you to what we call self-hunch, hypothesize your own style. But never are you or anyone else put in one or two of these boxes. You have a percentage score, if you like, of all four. And I'll go into what these mean in a bit later. And that is the process of determining what you're most aligned to, but also how uniquely different you are from either the other traits or individuals. This is the part, harnessing this, that leads to the sort of the diversity of behaviours and success of teams. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the screen, and I'd like you to work out by reading the following groups of words which one you're most likely aligned to. Now, you're likely to be aligned to 2, maybe even 3, but for the purposes of today, go with your gut feel and decide whether you're more like the pioneer traits. Are you more like the driver traits? Are you a little bit more aligned actually to the guardian traits? And be honest, it's not a test. I don't know who you are, so it's not a test. Or are you more like the integrator? Go with what you know about yourself, not what you want to be. So I'll just leave that there for 10 seconds whilst you read through those words.
And there's not a right or wrong answer to anything in all of this, is there? Because the team needs to be made up of all of these types.
Never. And there's no better and no worse, Steve, either. No matter what people walk away thinking, there really isn't. They've all got their superpowers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is ask my colleague Natalie to launch a poll. And I'd like you to pick up your phones, please, to be able to answer this. So we've got a Mentimeter poll here. Natalie, could you just walk through, please, how the audience is able to interact with this poll, please?
Sure. So we'd like you to tell us what you think your primary business chemistry type is. So I can see one person's already responded, but what you need to get is your mobile phone. You need to go to the camera app and hover over the code you see on the right-hand side of the screen. And that should take you to the question, and then you can put in the answer on your phone. If you're not able to scan the QR code, you can go to www.menti.com and enter the numerical code 6860559. And I'll keep that code at the top of the screen as well if you need that.
This is one of the great things I've discovered since we've come part of Deloitte. I love Menti. I love using it.
Yeah, we use it all the time. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so we've got a bit of a mix. Any more coming in? Any more votes in the audience?
There's a lot of shy people out there, clearly.
That's changing. Yeah, okay. All right then. Well, that's really interesting, actually, in terms of how we were thinking of talking through the types today. It's not, as we say, there's no right, no wrong, no better, no worse, but actually the order which we'll talk them through is very much showing up here today. So we've got what we think in the audience today is more guardian, more integrated traits sort of shared between you. And like I say, I'll go into that detail in a minute. What I certainly find, Steve, working with IT or system transformations or transformation teams, this guardian is always high because of the very nature of the work and the systems work they do. But with the integrators, actually, it's usually less high. It's the driver that's usually higher as well in that space. And I think that's because of the momentum and the drive and the change. But this audience with integrator would really help that change because of their commonality of connection and people. So I don't know if you've got any other comments on that, Steve.
No, I was expecting a few more drivers, rather than integrators. But it's really interesting. I'm fascinated by all of this. And guardians, that makes sense when you said about you find a lot more guardians on projects just because of their very nature. It's detailed step by step. It's wanting to see it all the way through. Yeah,
that's right.
Pioneers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, should we walk through? Should we walk through the types and see what we're on about?
Yeah.
So let's start with, in that case, our guardians. And our guardians, if there was one word that we would use to describe our guardians, and that doesn't mean the people in this audience is a typical guardian, is that they seek out stability. They don't just search for it, they're actually excellent at exemplifying it, particularly in times of crisis. And my goodness me, aren't we in crisis at the moment? You can see these traits, and it's a very orderly slide, Steve. I'm not sure you would put this slide together, for example, but it's important that it's orderly.
Unlikely.
You can see there, they're sort of reserved, they're practical in nature, they value loyalty. They really appreciate the need for details, like detail orientation across the middle. And they bring this structured and methodical approach to their work, which is superb. That brings the order and it brings the stability. They're disciplined, they're careful, they're meticulous. They dislike brainstorming excessively and excessive theorizing. And in addition, they're naturally the most introverted type. It doesn't mean they're all introverts. I'm certainly not categorizing, but they are generally those quieter types that you described about, I don't really hear from them in meetings. It's because they're the last ones to talk up, because they'll let others go before them, or they're considering what they're going to say. And my biggest advice is, when that is happening, the best thing you can do is allow that space. When you've asked a guardian a question, I think this might be, allow that space for an answer, because it'll be well thought through and well considered. So they view that silence as productive. And also, if you set them some work, they'll meet the deadline, but leave them alone to get on with it, rather than bugging them. But they'll come back and ask if they need some help. So it's really productive, that kind of introvertism and silence, if you like. Now, for all of the types, Steve, yes, you've got these positive interactive traits, but actually I wouldn't be teaching you all of it if I didn't talk about the negative perceptions. So what our research tells us is that the other three types can see all these traits, these observable traits on the left-hand side of our guardians, but under stress and pressure in particular, your traits, guardians on the call, could come out as what I'm about to show you. So it's not how you are, it's how others might perceive you, and therefore you then know to catch your behavior and flex and change to make sure it doesn't become an obstacle. We don't want obstacles in the workplace, we can work around it. So our guardians are definitely seen as trustworthy and thorough, but they could be seen to be stuck in the weeds a bit because of that sort of detailed nature of theirs. There are cool and calm and collected people, but they could appear to others as closed off. They're not being closed off. They've just got a world of information going on. They're committed to quality, but they're a little bit stickler for the rules. So there's some types that tend to like to rule break a little bit more. That is not our guardians. Rules are there to be kept for a reason. They tend to be willing to take on the tedious work, which others say it's tedious, by the way, not our guardians, but therefore the tedium can come through in that detailed level of work that they're at. Again, not how our guardians are, just how they can appear to be to others. So my advice is, if you're talking to your opposites, guardians, which is your pioneers, is come out of the detail, go headline first, bring the energy.
I remember doing the GDPR project at a place I was working. And of course, it was tailor-made for a guardian to be looking after all of the GDPR. I had to adapt quite a bit, but that was ultimate guardian territory, that project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's look then at the second most popular, shall we, the integrators. or is equal pretty much, wasn't it?
Mm.
So who are our integrators then? So if you're more in the category of integrator and you chose that, then that's the biggest word to remember and think about with our integrators: connection. That's with someone or something, by the way. It helps them feel more part of the story. There's a deeper meaning to the purpose of their work, and that's important. Integrators' power is bringing people and teams together. So their most defining traits sit in the center of this slide, Steve. So you can see there, they're empathetic, they're diplomatic, they value consensus, they're concerned about how people feel. And the superpower of the integrator is feeling their emotions. So it's not sympathetic, it's empathetic. They have this nuance where they can see if people are checked in, checked out, what's going on. And I would advise anyone when working with integrators is to pull on that. So your guardians will bring the order and the rigor and to the chaos. Your integrators will look at the people, and they are known to be helpful. They're not necessarily technical or numbers oriented. Many are, but they don't have to be typically like that because their power is making connections. Now, in our research, just briefly, you can see two different types of integrator here. These show up when integrator is your most common, what we call a primary. You might be more of a dreamer integrator, so you might be more introverted, for example. You might be more intrinsically oriented and motivated and really dislike that confrontation, but they're adept at seeing the nuance in particular. Or you might be more like a teamer. So teamers are outwardly focused, they value tradition, they're really relationship oriented, they're very social, responsible. And integrators, particularly teamers, interesting, we're doing this through LinkedIn, will have huge LinkedIn networks. Now, you might argue we all have, but the integrators will know who those people are, and they will draw on that network and make connections for themselves or others purposefully and deliberately.
Interesting.
So should we look at the
let's go into
let's look at the other side. So what might the other three types say about integrators? Because you do have your negative perceptions integrators as well. So I've talked about this already. They tend to bring people together. They're seen as that, but they could be a little bit people pleasing. So are they trying to please everybody? Particularly your opposites are drivers. So the drivers might think you can't please everybody, pick one or choose one. So just be aware of that. Really enjoyable to be around, but tend to be sometimes chatty and inefficient. So, for example, I'll go back to the drivers because there are opposites. And Steve, I think you're quite high in driver. So if we had a 30-minute meeting, how long might you want that meeting to really last for, ideally?
I'll be diplomatic and say 25, but
most drivers would say 15.
But I really want halfway. I want it done, get the points, and let's get out. Let's get the decision.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. So that sort of connection that the integrators are making at the beginning with the small talk or looking behind us in our houses that we live in and stay in, actually, if we lose that to connect, we connect better with the driver. It might be difficult for our integrators, but I am telling you that if you do that, you will have a stronger connection. That's what I'm here to advise today. So emotionally attuned are our integrators. Could be seen as a little bit overly emotional at times. They're definitely open-minded ones, but could be indecisive about, as I was saying, because you see both sides to the story.
I've seen that. I've definitely seen where we've been in projects and we've seen that. Oh, come on, make a decision. But we need to weigh both sides up and we need to check that. And what was really interesting, and I don't know, we may come on to this a bit later, but about how a company actually built up to be very consensus driven and integrator type driven was one I was working with. And then there was a merger between two and people had actually got quite into consensus driven now. And there was such a clash between something that was very drivery in the other organization. But yeah, it's quite fascinating. And actually that just brings me on to a thought. You've mentioned, the people's types. Does that vary around roles or anything like that? So can you change your personality, your role?
So can you change personality? In terms of business chemistry, you're kind of born into the working world in a certain way you like to work, is what I would say. But business chemistry can be situational. So if you are required to do, and let's take the Guardians we've talked about, a more detailed process-oriented role, your Guardian score might go up more than it would do naturally, because you are having to do that. But it also might attract those people who are more detail-oriented, more data, more rigor and around that. So it can affect that. It doesn't mean that you change or the role should change, but it certainly is looking at sort of dialing up or flexing up and down. And when we look at the IT roles, you know, that process, procedures, stewardship of what you're trying to do in your projects and your programs, the organization, the methodical approach to things, the analytics you're looking at, all of that really attracts our Guardian types, which you see here today.
Yeah, so it's actually, probably as much that the role attracts the type of person as much as it's not that somebody goes in and suddenly adapts themselves because the role, a bit of each, I guess.
Yeah, because you go against your kind of primary then, so you can't. It's exhausting, by the way, to be able to flex properly into certainly your opposite. So if you're trying to do pioneer and you're a Guardian or vice versa, it's exhausting, but you do get more success, but it's unsustainable to do it. So that's why you connect. You do that for connection, and then obviously people have their strengths, as we've talked about.
Yeah, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Should we look at the other ones then as well whilst we're here?
Yeah.
So let's look next at our drivers. I think we're coming into your categories now, Steve, aren't we? Yeah. So our drivers. Okay, so let's look at these then. So if there was one word that defines and describes our drivers, it's challenge, actually. They pursue challenge, they thrive off it in the most demanding of situations, and particularly where they can test their ability. They're superb at generating momentum. Now, again, if we stay in the middle of this slide, then they're technical, they're logical, they're quantitative in all their approaches. They're very savvy with technology as well as numbers. They're talented at sort of developing original ideas and thoughts, but they are more intent on the achievement of those over relationships in particular. So it's all about laser focused on kind of goals and where I can get to and where we're going. Now we've got the two subtypes again. We've got and it splits down the introversion and extroversion spectrum again as well. The commanders are outwardly focused. They're more extroverted, if you like. They're competitive, they're focused, they're goal-oriented, they're direct. I don't know if any of this is making you feel like this is you, Steve, or whether you might be more of a scientist. Now I would actually argue, and I've worked with scientist drivers, and again, remember these only really show up if it's in your high or your primary or secondary types. I'd argue scientists are also competitive. They just do it in a more quiet way because they're curious. They want to know why. The biggest and the best word I can recommend with drivers, they're going to ask you why. It might feel confrontational, but they want to know why. And the best way to work with a driver is to tell them. Even if it's hard message, tell them why, and then wait for that debate, because they really value debate to drivers. Get it all out on the table. Our scientists are really skilled at identifying patterns as well to understand things. They've got that sort of experimental side to them.
There's one question just come in, Jess. It's just interesting from Steve online. He said, do some of these have to be adapted depending on the cultural environment you're living and working in? So I guess that's following on from the role type discussion as well.
That's up to you, really. I would argue that organisations are getting better at recognising diversity in every form. But if you would like to flex better and connect better to either an organisation culture or a team, then yes, adaptation is the name of the game. But as I say, you can't do it constantly. That's to connect first and foremost and build the relationships. And then what I would recommend is you can use this kind of language, because it's non-emotive. It's brilliant at saying, can we be a little bit less driver about this and be a bit more integrator? Is a lot better than saying, you're being far too rude here. We need to consider the people. So I would recommend that you can use this for adaptation, but do it as and when is required for you and what's right for you.
I just have one question here, Jess. It's building on Steve. I think a lot of us have had experience with outsourcing, and in the early days of outsourcing, you'll understand, outsourcing to say India, there was a whole big cultural gap, and I recognize the character types, the driver, the guardian, etc. and everybody has those in them, as you say, but building on what Steve said, sometimes there's a cultural disconnect as to the character type and how to interpret and then respond.
Yeah, yeah. So business chemistry cuts across culture, and I've just seen another one coming about culture and geographies as well, and I'll use some of those geographies as examples. This is a global tool, and we find it cuts across culture and it works. And what I mean by that is it's got face validity. So if you've got anyone that is psychology based on the call, one of the validity metrics in psychometrics is it got face validity. Do people recognize themselves in what these traits and characteristics are? And that's a yes. So yes, they do, and it cuts across culture. Do we see nuances or not necessarily biases, but maybe groupings towards different business chemistry types in different cultures? Yes, we do. So just before Christmas, I worked with an Asia-based team of one of my large global clients, and we had almost absolutely no interaction whatsoever. And they were very high on the Guardian integrator space. They preferred to communicate to us through the chat function. They were very quiet. They're absolutely sponging in the information. And conversely, and actually I've seen an example come up there on Finns and Americans, actually our Finnish colleagues and the Netherlands colleagues are very high in pioneer and driver. And that is also seen as more their culture. The Finns and the Netherlands and the Dutch just call it out. So they are slightly higher in some of the profiles of driver and pioneer, but that doesn't mean to say the others don't exist. So I hope that answers the question a little bit with substance rather than just fluffing through what we see.
Yeah, no, definitely detail there. Go on, a bit more about drivers, and let's learn.
So driver, let's see, right, and often the drivers are very good at taking this slide. Actually, they're like, yeah, okay, that's about right. So what do the others say about drivers? So straight shooting. So you say what it is, and you keep it smart and short, but can be abrasive. Actually, I would change that to blunt and rude at times, and I mean that for the integrators. Often they can feel that from the drivers because they're opposites. They're focused, they're laser focused on getting stuff done and goals, but they can appear to have tunnel vision. So when you're in that meeting room and it felt almost like a battleground to some, and a guardian can't get a word in edgeways, and the drivers are so passionate, exciting, they've almost raised their voices or they might be hammering on the desk. That's exciting to the drivers because they've got everything out and they've decided where they're going. But then we're only going to that destination at times. And the irony is you like to be challenged to drivers and you can't always get into drivers. So a little bit more widening out tunnel vision is helpful. So you will take charge and lead the situation. You know, if sort of the Jim Collins, if I brought the bus in the room, a driver would say, yeah, I'll drive it. But did you turn around and check that we all boarded the bus with you? Because otherwise we're just self-serving of where you want to go in your destination with drivers. The drivers tend to get things done because of that momentum. They will get things done. It could sometimes, though, be about achievement of results over people or results over relationships. So that's a big thing to watch. It can feel like that, particularly to our integrators. And then our pioneers are finally. So our pioneers, they are the people that are into possibilities. If there was one word that we would describe our pioneers as, it's possibilities. They seek it, they thrive off it, they feel stifled without it. What our research shows is the traits of the pioneer most defined by these. You can see on the screen, they're imaginative thinkers, they're adaptable, they're spontaneous, they're naturally outgoing. They really embrace risk, and actually they share that with the drivers because there's some shared traits coming up. But they believe with great risk comes great reward. So they will take that to get the reward. They're really unconcerned with details. They're the opposites of guardians, and they prefer bigger picture. They speak quick, they walk quick, they're known to be energetic and exploratory. They don't see black and white. These are the people that see things in grey. They dislike structure and it feels like it limits their creativity. And actually working with a pioneer, particularly some of our people on the call, if you're high in Guardian, can feel like this sort of bumblebee approach you can see. But if you stick with them, if you allow them to kind of unreel themselves, then there's usually treasure at the end of what they're saying, Steve. So let's finish it off by looking at what the negative traits are. So perceptions only, not how our pioneers are. They're seen as big, bold, and inspiring and visionary, but do they actually think through to the execution stages. Our pioneers do, they just might not appear to be. They're seen as fun and energetic, but could be a little bit scattered for some people and all over the place with that thought process. You know, I would challenge some of the pioneers on the call, how many unfinished emails do they have open at the end of the day? You know, often it can be 10s and 15s, and you're smiling here, Steve, you know, and they might have started one at 9:30 and it's 5 and they've not bothered to finish it. I don't know if that seems realistic for you, Steve, as well.
Come a little bit close to home, some of these at the moment.
Yeah, then they might send them, they might delete them because it's already been answered, but they keep thinking, oh, I must do all that, all that, all that. So that's kind of how they work. They move and talk quickly, as we've talked about, but could lack the attention to detail and structure. In fact, lots of pioneers say, I don't like it, I'm no good at it. They're seen as creative because of the ideas and possibilities, but could be seen as impractical. So very classically, a pioneer might come up with an idea, or anyone might come up with an idea, and the pioneer gets excited about it, but maybe our guardians and drivers are already thinking, well, how? There's no point in going down this route if we don't know how to do it. But the other side of the argument is, doesn't matter how yet, let's just work with the idea because that's there. So there are 4 types, Steve.
Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. And just Jeremy's question there is this stackable from individual to team to division to company? Or does the individual always out in the end?
So stackable is an interesting word. This is a teaming tool, Jeremy. So we do, although we would assess individuals, we would then aggregate that up to a team. So yes, this still stands in terms of, if I was to work with a pioneer heavy team, my response and my feeling from them would be in these traits that I've talked about. So therefore, what I do and advise boards and senior leadership teams to do is think about the gaps. Where are the risk and gaps and potential pitfalls where they might not have seen a governance review coming in, or they're blindsided by something on, if they've got lack of guardian, for example, they're blindsided in something like, you know, detail, or their feedback is, you never get anything done. And I'm talking really sort of negative here, but it can appear to be like that. So if you mean stackable, does it kind of aggregate up? Yes, and it still is. The overwhelming trait of that team is whatever the business chemistry type in the popular is.
Do you find, Jess, that you can identify corporate culture in those, identified personas?
I'm smiling because, yeah, Natalie and I have got a few clients at the moment, one in particular that's definitely got a corporate culture. But because we started working with them on a global leadership level, and it's gone from top down through the divisions, then what is happening is they're starting to use this and their team or aggregate profiles to realize that they're recruiting to type, to change job descriptions. This isn't a selection tool. We never put anyone through it to recruit. We do put everyone in Deloitte through it throughout the globe when they on board with us. But can you change job descriptions because you need someone who is more likely to take the difficult decisions or connect the divisions that they're working with? Then yes, of course, we would see that changing, in that we would recommend that. And Natalie and I speak to this client every week, and they really are seeing a difference, proactively taking on board the fact that they didn't have diversity in their working styles, and now they do. And they're doing it through performance appraisals, they're doing it through performance conversations, they onboard people using this tool, etc. And that is slowly starting to realize and change the culture.
Brilliant.
Fascinating.
So I think you're now going to, I'm looking forward to the next bit, which are they going to teach us?
Yeah. We've got a question there from the C-suite. Do you want to save that, Steve, or do you want me to answer that on the...
Go for it now if you want, because I think it follows on from what you've been talking about.
Yeah, and I saw it pop up, but I've lost the question again. So I think it's something about C-suite traits.
Major traits and exec boards at C-suite level.
Yeah, so they're all there. All business chemistry types are present when I work with boards and senior leadership teams. Now, what the defining trait actually is the balance of the 4. What we find at divisional level or entry level is you might have 1 or 2 of the business chemistry traits you're most aligned to. What our survey tells us and research tells us over the last 10 years is the more senior you become, the more equally you balance out or you work in the 4 different business chemistry types. And the reason for that is learned behaviours, because you can't just approach at a senior level or C-suite level, can't simply operate in 1 or 2 of those fields all the time, because you have to communicate, you have to engage, you have to steward, you have to drive, and you have to transform. So what we do find in the C-suite is they're much more balanced across the 4 scores, and that's through practice and through learned behaviours, Steve, there. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. I'm sure Jeremy will tell us if it doesn't.
Yeah, do keep them coming in, everybody. It's great. So here's my promise to you to teach you this tool, and you can walk away with it. So everybody, I would like on the call, please, to think about somebody they work with. Not at home, not your other half, not your children, not your dogs, but a business colleague or a business stakeholder, a client, for example. And I am now going to teach you how to use business chemistry to what we call hunch, hypothesize their style. And the purpose of me doing that is so that when you look at your style that we've already done, you now know 1 or 2 things to flex and change to make that relationship more successful. And so when you're thinking about this person, the most useful way is someone you don't quite click with or connect with, or you just start to work with and you need to work better with. So I'm hoping everyone's got that business stakeholder in mind now. Yeah. And I'd like you to divide the circle horizontally into 2, please, in your mind. Now, does this person you're thinking about, do they embrace risk more? Do they decide quickly, walk quickly? Do they call things out? Do they brush off mistakes? Do they try it out? Yeah, fine, let's do it. Or do they only just about tolerate the risk? Do they deliberate over decisions? Do they internalize mistakes? Do they like the tried and tested and true? And are they the ones that make it happen? They can't be both, because they're polarizing views of these. If they're the top set of words, put them in the top hemisphere, the top half of this circle. If they're more like the bottom set of words, put them in the bottom half of the circle and keep them there. While still thinking about this person, are they more into building relationships? Are they more teaming? Do they like teamwork? Are they more expressive in their body language, their emotions? Do they display flexibility? Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Or are they a bit more contained? Do they value the work in the spreadsheets and the data? Do they value individual work? Are they quite contained and disciplined with not just their emotions, but maybe their habits as well? Do they question why, rather than say, yeah, cool? That you might hear them saying why, which might in some people's brains say, no, it's not. They just want to know why. If they're the left-hand set of words, shift that person to the left-hand side of that hemisphere. And if they're the right-hand side, move them to the right-hand side of that half circle, that hemisphere. And that's it. So in 90 seconds, you now know how to use business chemistry. And most importantly, if you've only got them in the top half or the bottom half or the left or the right, because I've said no one is one only, but you think they're more like 1 or 2, top, bottom, left or right, then that's enough for you to then think, where do I sit? And I'm hoping there's a few little light bulbs going off in the audience to say, I get it. So for example, if you're a pioneer working with a Guardian, great tip, tell them what you're going to talk about in the meeting, even if it's a 15-minute or 30-minute, give them 3 bullet points before you go into that meeting. You've already made a better connection because they can be more prepared. Drivers, if you're working with a driver, keep the meeting short, sharp. If they've got time for chat at the end, they will do. But the opposites go for integrators and Guardians. So I hope now the audience, Steve, can see 1 or 2 things they can do different to connect better with opposite or different types.
No, I think that's really good. It's dead simple as well, and to give a fairly broad brush, but it works. I've just thought of about 2 or 3 different people that I'm applying it to and thinking, yeah.
Great, good.
And now I've worked out why I've roughed somebody up as well.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they didn't want me to go in AWOL. Yeah. Makes sense. Oh, that's great. That's really, really brilliant. And that's great. And so much of this is quite easy when we're physically in the same places and we can watch the body language. But how can we do this? How does this change, or does it change in the virtual world that we're all in now?
Yeah, really common question, actually, and this is where I'm going to start polling the audience again. So if anyone's switched off, you'll need to switch back on again. There's no rest for this this webinar. We did 2 sets of research, and I say we, it's the royal we, actually, it's Natalie who led this research on the call. We did it on week 3 in UK lockdown and week 10 in UK lockdown. And we wanted to understand the effect of virtual working on the business chemistry types. There's definite merit in appreciating how to best connect with them. And by the way, Zoom fatigue doesn't just come out with one of the types, it's absolutely across the board. So what I'm suggesting, Steve, it's all right with you, can we poll the audience again if I hand over to Natalie?
We certainly can.
And we ask them what they think. So Natalie, we've got some questions, haven't we, again, for our audience?
Yep, we have. So
over to you, thanks.
Yeah, so you need your mobile phones again, as Jess mentioned. So go to the camera app and hover over the QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, or go to www.menti.com and enter the code 6860559. And you should see our first question appear. I'll give you a couple of seconds just to log back into Menti. You'll see our first question: which type needs virtual social check-ins the most?
So knowing what you know now about business chemistry, which type do you think needs that social check-in most? So vote now. Let's see how they're doing. Yeah, see, this is how simple and easy it is. You know, you picked it up straight away. Yes, our integrators do. They still talked about needing those social check-ins. I know that's got a little bit too much now, even for our integrators, because we're certainly in the UK a year into lockdown almost, which is pretty scary. So how do you therefore connect better with them? So what our research told us is integrators still do want to share by video. They're the ones that want the videos on. I'm sorry, Guardians, if you don't, but the integrators do, because they can read your faces and they can read your Zoom body language as well. And that helps them to connect, and it gets their attention as well. They do value the small talk. They do value the, oh, what's on your wall? Or, you know, if a kid runs in, they're going to be the one that will also comment on that. So the virtual check-ins are important to connect with your integrated colleagues and stakeholders. Let's have a look at the next question then. Which type do you think prefers to connect via email?
Harry's asked an interesting question there in the chat. That's saying he's enjoying to listen to it all, which is good. Bit of a fun question for the panel. Jess has referenced Steve being a driver. Steve, from working with Jess, which category do you think Jess would probably fall into?
I like that. Not me on the spot this time.
No. This could end very quickly. I'm not fully sure, actually, at the minute.
We could maybe ask the audience what they think I am as well.
That'd be an interesting one.
So let's have a look at the results. Yeah, Guardians, exactly. Really quick, simple, easy. You've got this already. Why do they like that? Because they like the time to consider. And so in an absolute ideal world, they would be well considered responses and emails, and they would work through email very often to be able to consider what they're going to say and then send it over and send it to the person. Unfortunately, Guardians, that's just not available. It's not how we're able to work. But those emails do give the clear purpose and materials in advance. So my biggest tip is, if working with Guardians, tell them what you're going to ask them or talk about in the meeting, provide a small little agenda, ask them to look at materials in advance. They're the ones that will look at them, and be prepared. Because if you've asked the Guardian to be prepared, then you be prepared as well, that you know what's on page 59, because it's only polite and right that you would know that content as well. Let's look at the other two and then we'll come to Harry's question. So which type misses bouncing off ideas from others most, do you think, from what you know? Okay, let's have a look, see what the answers are coming in as. It got a bit stuck. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, pioneers, absolutely. They're the brainstormers. They're the ideas bouncing. They can't do it. They can't. And it's similar to integrators. They can't kind of desk stop, at their colleagues, which actually some of our driver colleagues might massively enjoy now. But no, they like that. They get better. They build with energy. Their ideas get better by brainstorming with others. So they are really missing that. How to build that energy when you can't be there? Use things like I am. If you've got instant messaging, or talk about something you've just seen out the window, or something fun that you've done, avoiding those rigid agendas, avoiding them having to work through that Excel spreadsheet. Anything where they can be a bit more bouncy will be better. And the reason for that is, if you push them into looking at structured, detailed data over and over, they'll start to check out. So make sure you can bring some energy and ideas to it. Let's look at the final one then.
Yep. I think that might have come up.
Oh, did it come up
Earlier for, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it came first.
I think it was, sorry about that. Yeah, it was at the very start.
Okay, so that's the yes. Which ones dislike the lack of visibility for their team's work and tasks?
So we've already got the results on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can see why it might be a split on Guardian Driver. What we found was it's a little bit more Driver. Driver like to know what's going on. They don't like to be blind by things. They like to know things are on time and on schedule. So they like things concise. And so it's more so the drivers, but I can see the Guardians would like to know that too. So tips for drivers: keep your meetings short, get the materials, headlines first, get to the point quickly. So, knowing everything you do now, shall we answer Harry's question, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, because I actually, I know because we've chatted, so probably it'll be good to get people to put in the chat actually what they think.
Yeah, it's a bit unfair. They've not worked with me, but the way I'm talking, the way that I am engaging, where do you think my primary type or secondary type sits? Type into the chat.
Let's see what we get.
Oh, we've got a mix, got a right mix. What's coming up most? Integrated factor. So no driver. Now, I don't know if you all do know me, but I don't have any, sorry, no Guardian, I should say. I only have 4% Guardian in me, so good call on that. And then we've got a mix between driver, pioneer, integrator. Yeah, I am high pioneer and integrator, so I share that. So thank you for bringing that up, Natalie. So I'm into the teaming, I'm into the sort of, you can see I'm expressive, the way I might nod, the facial expressions I use is really good clues in integrator. The way I'm interacting with Steve, there's less structure, it's more flowing. That's definitely between our pioneers working well together. But yeah, very integrator based, because people are important to me. Connections with people or things are important. I do have a fairly high driver, actually, Jeremy, as well. So I've got about 25% driver in me. So I want to get stuff done. Then I get stuff done. I mean, I carved out a business and I've built it. So I must have some momentum and generating, but I definitely can't, I can't fall into the camp of valuing results over people. So that would go against my primary and secondary types. But good spot, absolutely no Guardian in me. So what do? I've got a team full of Guardians, that they're the way that I work with them, and they pick that up for me.
Steve quiet for a while, driver. Yeah, Jeremy worked with me for a while.
So
there you go.
That's a good guide. If you're trying to develop a team, try and achieve an outcome, get the team around you with these personas or these types, which help you deliver that outcome.
Yeah, do because of their strengths, don't because you're hiding behind bad behavior. Just because I don't like detail, and it literally, as soon as I see it, I can feel my brain shut down. That's not right. I can't just rely on others. There needs to be an extent that I do that to create trust and my knowledge. So yes, get the strength of the team, harness the diversity, but don't hide behind your bad behaviors. I can't do that because I'm no good at it because I'm an X. Is not the way to do it.
Wow, that's been totally fascinating, and I think everybody's learned quite a lot. Wow, 1:25, we're doing really well in terms of time. I think I've got loads of questions, and I think there are loads that everybody could ask, but I think we'd end up going on till 3:30 in all of this. So it's really, really fascinating. So what I'll do is I'll do a quick shout out. I think summarizing it is, it's just what this is going to give us and everybody on the call is an ability to do better teaming. We should hopefully get better innovation. More importantly, we should avoid conflict. We should be able to avoid the conflicts. We should get better governance, and hopefully we should all work better together. And we're all going to be looking at each other now and all going, every conversation that everybody has is going to be going, I wonder what type they are for the rest of the day. And you'll all take it home and you'll analyze your other halves.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, be careful with that, because they'll call you out for sure. But I tell you what your other half might say is, you say, oh, I think I came out as this. What do you think? They're a good judge, someone you trust in business or maybe at home. Yeah, of course you'll like that, because sometimes you don't always see it. But remember, it's a business tool and it is all about that. It's observable behavior. So you can start doing it this afternoon. Some of the stuff I've said already, and start spotting it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now I'm going to try and do there's Jessica's contact